You're trying to win. Inspect your friends. I see right through you, cause you are your crew. You say you're different. You say you've changed. But if anything comes up missing, who do they blame? Birds of a feather flock together now.
Winston-Salem, welcome to Intersections and Conversations, where we are going to explore how the arts can help change our society. At each of these, you will hear from different people in your community, artists and non-artists alike, who believe that the arts can provide the change that we need. Intersections and Conversations. Welcome to our first podcast, thanks to the Less Desirables. We're here to explore how the arts can provide some needed change in our society. So we really wanted to just bring some people in today to ask one specific question. How can the arts help systems change? And so our first person that arrived today for this kind of a flash mobby type idea is Peter Wilbur. He is currently the music teacher at the arts-based middle and elementary schools in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So, Peter, welcome, and thanks for being part of the team.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. So to the question, the first thing I thought about was just how I handle this in my professional role in a day-to-day situation. So teaching music to kids, for me, especially as someone who wasn't conservatory trained or really trained at all, I'm a self-taught guitarist, essentially. What I really try to teach my kids is the artistic process and the value of creativity and especially improvisation. So I feel like if you instill that in kids in this community, what they'll do with that going forward, it's hard to even imagine the transformation that could cause. Thinking outside of music, just improvisation and thinking on your feet and problem solving in all kinds of arenas, not just in the arts.
So there are multiple studies that are available that show us that exposure to music at an early age is instrumental in kind of creating some synaptic connections and kind of creating these synaptic connections between both hemispheres of the brain, because music lives in kind of this anomalous region of the brain. What exactly do you feel is like the primary motivation once you've exposed your children to many different genres of music?
The motivation, you mean what do I think their motivation is, or what's my motivation for doing that?
Okay, we can look at it
Any
both
of that,
ways.
yeah.
What's your motivation for doing that, and how do you think it motivates them in their daily life?
Right, sure. So on a real basic level, a lot of the research with music has been done as a parallel to literacy. So we've discovered that music works along the same channels as literacy. So for kids who struggle with reading or maybe don't have a reading-rich environment in their home, it's another way to access and grow that part of their brain so that they're ready to be learners and, readers and thinkers and writers. But as far as exposing them to diverse genres of music, obviously right there, that's a way into respecting cultures from around the world and even in our own city. Rather than preaching about we need to respect these people and learn about these people, you just listen to the music and right away you have this instant access to this whole kind of rich stew that, in any genre of music, there's the people and what they've gone through and what they've suffered, where they've been, the important events to them, and even where they come from that are just in that music. If you take reggae, for example, you play one Bob Marley song and it just tells more than you could say in an afternoon lecturing about the place. You just listen to the song.
Well, it's almost like a Bob Marley song is a history lesson of sorts. I'll go ahead and let everybody know I named my first child after Bob Marley, so I'm a little in tune with what Peter's talking about here. We just had Eric Glenn join us.
Greetings.
Eric Glenn is with Authoring Action. He is working with youth in order for them to get. Well, you tell me. What do you do with Authoring Action? What's the primary purpose?
All right. The primary purpose of Authoring Action is basically to let young people know that they have a voice. It's not to give them a voice because they already have that voice. So it's basically to give them opportunities to express their opinions, to kind of foster their creativity. Young people are exposed to filmmaking, songwriting, song editing, film editing. So it's basically like that oasis, kind of that enclave to let people foster, to let people grow, and an opportunity that they may not otherwise have. Like, there's really not music in the school system anymore, so it's kind of up to the community. I guess I just walked in on the conversation, but I'm assuming we'll get to this. But it's kind of up to the community to provide experiences for our youth. So
beautiful.
That's authoring action.
Yeah, and it's almost like a creative garden. So you guys are like the farmers of creativity with these young minds. Is that kind of
That's the way to put
decent
it.
synopsis?
Yeah.
And like we've said with Peter here, and you just walked in, the question that we're trying to answer today is, how can the arts help systems change? And you can kind of read that question two ways. You could read it, well, how can the arts help systems change? And then you could read it, systems in of themselves, how can we provide systems change? So you can think about that in two ways, and I'd love to hear what your thought is.
Wow. I think for me, like the key to both of those questions is kind of like the arts is where people meet, regardless of your political affiliation or your religious ideology or what have you. There's always going to be that song. There's always going to be that movie. There's always going to be that painting. There's always going to be that piece of art that is kind of the enzyme, I guess, that kind of breaks down the walls between people, And so, I don't know. I think the arts is a very, very powerful tool to kind of get to that change, because it is that thing that kind of brings people of different thoughts together. In order to affect change, you really need different viewpoints. You need different inputs from the community.
Interesting. That's so by providing these different opportunities, the arts provides these different opportunities to kind of explore parts of yourself that are related to others.
Sure.
So we just had somebody else come in. You may have heard the door squeak. And Zac Trainor, thanks for joining us today. This is kind of a do-drop-in session, a little bit of a flash mob idea. And door. So your mic is live, sir.
Oh,
and
squeaking on through.
We are just we're answering kind of this answering this question of how can the arts help systems change? And we're doing this so that we can introduce this idea out to the public. So I'd love to have your input on that question.
Well, the thing with arts, no matter where you come from, your background, your education, I mean, you can look at art in a lot of ways, experience art in a lot of ways, but one thing it does is connect us through emotions, through raw emotions that speak to an instinctual need or desire for knowledge and for growth. I think that's ultimately the goal of art, is to expose both our differences and our similarities. And I think that's a powerful thing that art can do. How does it address those issues? I mean, by starting, like Eric was saying, to break down those barriers and getting people that might have different viewpoints, different backgrounds, might fight at a political rally, but here in the gallery they're together and they're experiencing something that could open up doorways or paths for them to collaborate in the future or bring them together in other ways they might not have thought possible.
So the arts is a community builder.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a community builder and an educational tool. The fact that they're taking arts out of schools, that it doesn't get a lot of funding, that's a scary thing for the future. If you're not going to, I mean, these are the minds that are creating the future, so they need art more than anything in the schools. And art's disappearing from communities, because it's hard to keep the arts funded, it's hard to keep galleries open, it's hard to provide spaces for these things to exist. So I think that's an extremely important aspect of the issue, is the education of art. I think the more people are educated about art, the more they'll see how it can be used as a tool, an effective tool.
Wow.
Art as a tool. And
Wow.
I think, Peter, you understand that.
Yeah, I
you
do.
you utilize art as a tool, as a tool of instruction.
I do.
Yeah. And then, Eric, you do the same thing with Authoring Action.
True.
It's the art is the tool that you use to bring that voice out in
right.
individuals.
I was thinking when you were talking about getting into the raw emotion that, why are more novels read than history books? It's because we get information. We're humans. We're narrative people. We like stories. That's what people did. They sat around telling stories. And that's the artistic way of getting information across. It's not always the logical, the write an essay, the write an explanatory, political tract. You get that this is my story. This is what I've lived through. Let me share that with you, whether it's through, a short story or a poem or a painting or a film. That can be a lot more powerful. It cuts through that. It gets under the logical brain almost and gets in that emotional channel that people can respond to. Oh, wow, that's what you went through. Let me check that out more, rather than that us versus them. No, we're not. They're Republicans. We're Democrats. We're white. We're black. Whatever. Can cut through that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And kind of to piggyback on what you're saying, like change kind of starts from that emotional place that you're talking about. You kind of cut through and get to it, and then that's where it seems like the work would kind of start.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, can any of you kind of give us an example of how the arts has changed something in society? Either historically, something current, something that you've been involved in, or just something that you've observed from afar?
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot. So I'm trying to plan this event that is going to coincide with the inauguration. Just happened to be on that day. And I've been thinking about a lot of what would be good sorts of activities to go on. And of course, I keep going back to songs because that's what I do. And the songs I was thinking of are kind of those classic, repurposed, appropriated spirituals that were really done a lot during the civil rights movement. Things like We Shall Overcome. Totally powerful song. It's got a very direct message. But, I do this song with 5-year-olds. And the concept of the song, even if I tried to explain it to them, they wouldn't get it. But there's something about a tune like that. You start it and you can just see these kids sitting there with their eyes closed. They're reverent. The change is right there. And I think oftentimes, again, people saying, oh, we're oppressed, this is what we want, that's great. But then you hear people singing and you see people are really united together and they plan something and they work towards a goal and they're putting an artistic expression forward. It just can really touch people's hearts in a way that, again, it circumvents the mind. It goes straight to the heart. So you think of the civil rights movement and the songs, protest movement in the 60s. That definitely helped change the world.
So music has been instrumental in promoting social change.
Right.
And okay, I can definitely see that. Any more ideas bubbling up?
It's kind of the same thing. I guess you're a musician also, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how it hits me too. So, look at hip hop.
Totally.
Hip hop it's global. It's brought the globe together. It really has. Around different topics. It can be political. It can be what some people think is nonsensical. It spans the gamut of human experience. And it's connected the globe. So that's a very visible change that's happened. Because of an art form.
And that one, hip hop obviously it's kind of like for me, I used to be in the punk scene. All of a sudden, random people who didn't have credibility before, we didn't go through the institution or the academy. You grab a mic and you start saying what you need to say to whoever, and you throw a beat over it and you're rapping, and all of a sudden it's acceptable. It gave this new voice to people who didn't have a voice.
Yeah, it's like,
that's power.
You can have kids that grew up in Florida or New York or California or Kentucky or Palestine or, just sharing the same kind of experience,
So that what you guys are talking about makes me think about lyrical poetry, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nikki Giovanni and Bell Hooks. You were speaking about the civil rights movement and kind of providing that voice to what our culture has deemed the other, in quotes. I watch my oldest daughter kind of explore these different texts now. And so what I feel is that, the poet has kind of been at the forefront of that. I'm a huge romantic British romantic buff. I mean, I'm into Coleridge and Percy Bysshe Shelley and George Gordon Lord Byron. And those, raw emotions, going back to what you were talking about with like hip hop and even with, some of the more, the older Negro spirituals that, were part of that movement in the 60s. That's fascinating. Zac, you're a visual artist primarily. That's your thing.
Right.
So do you have any kind of examples out of visual art that you think have helped move society along?
Well, definitely. Speaking to hip hop, I would think graffiti was one. By raising the question of, is this art? Is it vandalism? It can be vandalism, but most of the time it's not. And most of the time it's done in places that actually, that's the most beautiful thing about the place, is the graffiti. Nobody's fixing up the side of the building, or, what it does is it draws attention to that building, it draws attention to that area. And people that have to walk by it every day and see this dilapidated building, instead of seeing that, they see a message or they see something they relate to, which that also empowers people. It empowers a community to feel like, even though if no one's looking or listening to us, we can make them look and listen, through the art. Another visual art that I think, because now, we were talking about the 60s, like back in the 60s, you didn't have the internet like this, you didn't have the internet at all. So now photography, I think, has been, it's kind of like the stepchild or something in a way of the art world. Whereas you can have fine art photography, but then I feel like the artistic journalists that are out there, the people that are bringing this imagery to people, to see Standing Rock, to see Ferguson, without being there, bringing that kind of media to people, video as a visual art form. These are art forms that have continued to develop and grow over the years. You could say that for a lot of mediums, but nothing like photography has. Painting, a lot of the abstract stuff, it's powerful and it's expressive, but I mean, it's not that much different than what they were doing in the 60s. They're still addressing the same issues, and so are we, and so are, that's part of it, but the art gets more powerful every time. Now, if I made a flyer in the 60s, maybe some people in my community would see it before they rip it down. Now I can make something and put it on the internet and the world can see it. We have the ability to raise each other up through media, like sharing our ideas, sharing our inspiration, our struggle. And I think photography and video captures that, because it captures when it's not focused on an actor or a model, it can be really, really even
the other
more
2%.
Yeah. When you get something real, it does feel like, that, you're stealing my soul. But it's like, no, I'm showing your soul to the world, is what I'm doing.
Interesting. So arts exposes us. It exposes like our innermost thoughts, and there must be benefit to that. It must move the needle somehow by allowing that expression to. It's almost like, I find art, whenever it's just put out there, it's left in the hands of the beholder at that point. They make it what it is.
So true.
Mean, the intent of the artist. I mean, we have intention when we do art, but does that always get conveyed? Is that how it's perceived and received?
I like that. There's a whole theory of readers and authorship that, the old model was the author, your job as a reader was to figure out the message of the author. Now we think the text actually exists between the reader and the author. That's the text. Because when I read a novel and you read it, we're bringing such different things to it. Every image is triggering different associations for us, and we're building a different meaning for it. You and I have a different meaning when we read the same novel, and then we talk about it, and that's a third meaning.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
I see what you're saying. It's almost like an adaptation. Like you read a novel and then you see the movie, and the movie that was in your head is totally different than the movie that's on the screen. You know?
Yes. Yeah. I was also thinking when you were talking about art, again, back to the 60s, that's the first time we had pop art and op art and people, putting soup cans on canvases. And what does that do? Well, to me, what it does is it's exploding the whole idea of how images are being manipulated in our society to sell us ideas and products. Advertising is so powerful, we don't even notice it. It's just a backdrop to our life. And these artists were the first ones saying, hey, look, see these images? This is what you're being force-fed all the time. You need to take a look at how it's being told to you, not just, oh, that's just the way it is. I think that's a really important function art had, too, to kind of pull back the curtain and show you Oz controlling our desires. Nobody needed deodorant until they invented it and marketed it. No one needed cigarettes. No one needed anything until they pushed it on us. So art has the power to expose the corporate dominance of our image making.
So after this conversation with how, let's ask the same question again that we kind of started off with. How do you think the arts can help systems change?
I mean, speak the truth, right? To power. I mean, that's a basic one-liner, but I still think it's true. You can draw it on a canvas and sing it in a song in a way that will get noticed more than if you write a letter to the editor.
Yeah, so we've got all kinds of different events that we're planning.
Too.
You've got this post-up idea that I think we just received validation back in the through the Huffington Post that this is being done. This is something that is in people's faces. I mean, you've done music soundscapes. We're looking to do more of those. You have the Artists Unite event that's coming up January 20th. Yep. Intersections and Conversations is alive, and we really want more people to join us. It is truly about artists uniting in order to kind of move along some of our more intractable social problems. We're looking at race, class, and power issues. Yes. We're looking at wealth inequity. We're looking at income inequality. How can the arts help address that? If you have ideas, then join us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/intersections and conversations. You can reach out to any of our artist members and just have a conversation. Coffee Park Arts, Authoring Action, and Delta Arts Center are partnered together on this endeavor, and we are funded through a grant that was provided by the Winston-Salem Foundation, the Keenan Institute for the Arts, the Arts Council of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, and it was all through a plan that was devised by EMC Arts, Incorporated out of Harlem, New York. The funding has been provided by the Kresge Foundation, and we definitely want to offer them thanks to provide us this opportunity to try something different. Mm-hmm. Take a non-linear approach to some of the more intractable ideas. And this has been the first Intersections and Conversations podcast. Look forward to this monthly. And get involved, get into it, as James Brown once said. Thank you for joining Intersections and Conversations, a joint venture between the Winston-Salem Foundation, the Keenan Institute for the Arts, and the Arts Council of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. And special thanks to EMC Arts, Inc. out of Harlem, New York for providing the experimental platform that we are utilizing to explore this endeavor through funding made available through the Kresge Foundation. All of the content on Intersections and Conversations belongs to Intersections and Conversations. If you want to use it, please contact us at facebook.com/intersection